So I'm in my room. Let's pull up the UVs of the room, which are, it's not UV mapped as we can see. And I'm gonna isolate my room. Oh, jinkies. Hold on. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to do the floor by itself real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the floor faces, select the center one, Shift period grows the selection outward. So it's a quick way of grabbing extra faces and expanding out your selection. Now I only have to grab that one little sliver in the entertainment center, and now I have my entire floor. Show UV toolkit. Let's pop you over here. There we go. And I'm just going to planar map that on the Y by middle mouse clicking on planar. And you see now it's planar mapped on the Y. There's my floor. Now, just a quick note. If I'm not going into a video game, I can actually have my UVs on top of each other if they have different materials on them. If I'm going into a video game, you want to make a second UV set for light maps. So you have to have at least one UV set. You can have one UV set where there's a lot of texture or UV shells overlapping, but your second UV set, UV map, has to have everything laid out with no overlap. And that's so that the game engine can calculate light maps. Okay. I'm not going to worry too much right now. I'm just doing it like this. So just so you can see it. So I've got the faces of the floor planar mapped. We can see that the text is showing properly and it's not inverted. And with that floor selected, I'm going to right click on it, say assign new material, and let me just make sure I've got everything. Come on. So I've got my floor selected, that whole shell. The face is selected, and I'm going to put an Arnold standard surface, AI standard surface on there. And now I'm just going to bring into that right-click material attributes. There's my the material I made. I'm just going to rename it. Whatchamacallit? Floor material. Okay. And so now I just start plugging in those textures. So under base color, I click on the little checker box and say I want to put in a file. And then in the folder, wood floor base, badoom. Remember, if you don't see your textures, press 6, and that turns your textures on. Now, it's on there, but we can see it is obnoxiously large. Right? So, before I do anything with it, I'm going to go to the placement node, and where it says repeat UV, I'm going to tell it how many times I want it repeated. So let's try 4 by 4. That's not too bad. It's definitely better. And I'll have to, unless I make connections in the hypershade, I'm going to have to do this to all the placement nodes for the normal map and the roughness map. So right now I have, there we go. Just as I figured, all the items are breaking up the floor pretty well. So if I were to just do a render really quick right now just to see what that looks like. Hello. Let's go to my other camera. Wait for it. Okay, so we got this going on. But we can see that because I don't have that normal map, my floor texture is essentially polished to almost a maniacal perfection. All right. Gosh, the poor person who had to polish that. So it's just like super because it's the default that's in there, right? So as I start to actually go into my material, I'll just click on this little button here, which brings me back up. I click on it again, takes me back in. Now I can go under Roughness, do the same thing, File, click there, and say I want to bring in my Roughness texture. You always know your project is set because I'm not digging for anything. So I know my project is set right. If I don't have to go, oh wait, let me go to the folder for it. If you have to go to the folder, then the project's not set or it's not looking in the right place. So there's my Roughness. And I may still want to tweak that out, but we'll just see. And I will have to go into the placement node of that Roughness and then change the repeat UV so it lines up with the texture. And then lastly, I have to put in my normal map. And I go into the material, scroll all the way down to where it says geometry. And under bump mapping is where you would put a normal map or bump map. One note is for a normal map, make sure that right here you tell it use as tangent space normals for a normal map. And then in the bump value, that's where we plug in the normal map. Come on. And then badoosh, you're going to notice the floor changes a lot now. And I also want to make sure that I change the placement, the repeat UV of that normal map as well, 4x4, so that it lines up well with those crevices and stuff. Now we can see it's working a lot better. I'm thinking I want to tile it a little bit more. I think the planks are a little big. Maybe, maybe not. But now we can see that floor is working a lot better. You see that? And look at the lighting coming from around the TV, how the normal map and the Roughness is breaking it up a little bit. If I do want to, oh, jinkies, stop that. If you want to mess around, you can uncheck the Roughness and then see what would happen if you like just start messing with the value itself. If I want to add, like, so we have a little bit of a shine and then we have the normal map breaking it up, but I did want to put like a nice wax or coat on it. There's actually an option in the AI standard surface called coat, which allows you to put like an acrylic coat on top of it. And as I increase that, it keeps those details previously, but it puts a shiny surface coat on top of it to add another layer of reflection and stuff. And you can see I turned it on, and it's giving me a little more of a reflection of the TV on the floor right there. And, you know, you would use it sparingly and adjust it, but the roughness is going to be how shiny it is. 0 would be like a mirror, and 1 would be totally matted. But this is also a nice way that if I put something like a 3D cloud in that roughness, I could have certain patches shiny and other patches like kind of dirty and just kind of dull. And then the IOR is the basically your refraction index of how light is bending, how you would actually see it. Last thing with that is you can always go in to the color texture itself and make subtle tweaks on the texture level inside of Maya. So I go into that file node and check this out. If I scroll all the way down, there's a thing called color balance. And right here under the color balance is where I can do some tweaks. I can adjust the exposure of that, making it brighter just on the texture level, or I can make it darker. As well as I could change the color gain if I want to basically add just a slight layer of color on top of it. So if I want to give it just a little bit of a reddish tint, and that actually looks kind of cool because I still have the variations, but it's giving me this subtle reddish tint over it to make it look like the floor was stained. It was all different pieces, but they were stained more, so now you see there's more of a reddish tint to it. So you can actually do a lot inside of Maya once you're inside of here, just to make adjustments and stuff like that. And now that's actually looking kind of cool. The walls I wouldn't spend as much time on. I would just do a texture that I can make a bumper normal map that would just give it a little bit of texture and then just put the color into the material itself. So I don't have to make a color texture for it. I just want to give it an actual bumpiness to it, a subtle bumpiness to break things up. Some items I have inside of here I might not actually want to even texture if I'm going to use a procedural on it. We'll be going over that next week, which is using procedural materials, which is really cool. Procedural materials are something like this. Actually, they are like that. This is what we'll be going over next week. The grapes, the wine and the glass, the apple and the cherries are all procedural, and the cheese are all procedural textures, even the knife and the table. So right now, there is no texture files being used in what you see right here. That's all procedural. So the cool thing is you don't actually have to, if you can get away with it, you don't actually have to texture everything. So that it is 100%. Oh man, I have to hand paint every texture for every item. No. Certain things, yes. Not everything though. If the end result, nobody would know the difference and it still looks good, then yeah. And it saves you some time. Do a file, save scene as. Pause my render, but kind of digging that. So, real quick, the things I would use tiling textures for in this scene, and then maybe vary it up. The couch, potentially, or at least part of it. The carpet or rug. The curtains, unless you have a specific pattern that would be on them, like, you know, it's a kid's room or something like that. You know, different elements of that nature. Things that might be unique. The tables, possibly. The bookshelf. The entertainment center. The walls would be tiling. The plant, it depends. Depends on how you want to kind of texture it.